This week's episode is sponsored by Ice Barrel, the industry leader in cold water immersion. It's time to take your recovery to the next level. If you're serious about reducing inflammation, sharpening your mental game, and speeding up muscle recovery, right now you can get 15% off your very own Ice Barrel with the code EWN15 at checkout. Or hit that link in the description and throw your hat in the ring for a chance to win an Ice Barrel 500. But move fast, the giveaway wraps up October 31st. Discount code is only applicable for the Ice Barrel and not chillers. Don't sleep on this. Take the plunge and feel the power of ice baths today.
Welcome, guys, to the Everyday Warrior Nation podcast. We're going through a little bit of a rebranding. John Welbourn has officially come on, so this is going to be an exciting ride. You're going to see a lot more content from us. John, I thought we'd start with a little vulnerability today.
I'm in.
Not my vulnerability. We're going to use Will's vulnerability. And Will, I've told you to get a mic on your desk. That is number one. Will just took a DEXA scan this morning.
Oh, nice! Congratulations.
We've been talking, and what's the foundational platform? Matt was walking him onto it for Power Athlete. It's not Grindstone. It's
for what?
For foundational.
Oh, Bedrock.
Bedrock. Thank you. So he'll be starting the Bedrock, but not bad scores at all.
What'd you get?
He was 22% body fat.
All right.
He was 37 pounds, right?
160 total.
What was the visceral fat? Did they give you that one?
Does that sound right?
That'd be pretty good. If you had 1.16 of visceral fat, that's pretty good. I've seen much higher.
That's the fat.
Yeah, it's the fat around the organs. That's the stuff that's really dangerous.
So Will, and I'm going to be working out with Will in the mornings. One, he'll probably see great results because you really have never really gotten into like a heavy regimen lifting.
No, I used to be.
So you'll see that lean muscle mass go up, and you'll see that body fat come down, as long as you're watching your diet appropriately. But this is your realm, but I've always felt DEXA scans are one of the best sort of assessments of overall health.
Yeah. I mean, the DEXA scan is by far the best technology we have. I mean, that stupid in-scale deal where you stand in your bathroom, I mean, it's a failure. Even like the bod pod, if there's ways to cheat it. Dudes used to put quarters in their butt crack, like a roll of quarters. So in the NFL, we used to do the bod pod, which is like a big like egg that you sit in. So guys figured out that if they got rolls of quarters and stuffed them in their pants, that would increase the density and would actually help them tremendously. So one of the guys was trying to cheat it, and we caught him with a roll of quarters. It's pretty funny.
Was there punishment for that?
No, I crushed him. He was, yeah.
Just a little social pressure.
Yeah, I think shame is still a powerful motivator when it comes to body composition and training and working out. So, and for a lot of guys, and I know this isn't necessarily very popular in it, but, not being able to hold the standard or being the one guy that doesn't do it, I mean, that's pretty powerful, especially, understanding how we evolve in terms of these little cliques and having friends. And you can go look at, I just had a guy on the podcast, Power Athlete Radio, and we were talking about like why men over 40 were so lonely. And it's like, I know why they kill themselves. I didn't know until I turned 40. I always thought that was weird. And then I turned 40 and I was like, oh man, dudes are lonely because they don't have, it's not like they can show up on a bike at their buddy's house anymore where all the other bikes are and knock on the door and be like, can we come in and play?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's one of those things where women are dramatically better at making friends, keeping social structure, doing these little things, like whether it be, during COVID, all of a sudden I look over, my wife's on a Zoom call having, cocktails with her friends. Like my friend was like, hey, do you want to drink a beer on Zoom? I'm like, not at all. Like, if you want to send me memes while we drink beers, that'll be funny. But like, guys are just dramatically different, and I think they need things that allow them to kind of pull in. So, I mean, training together by far the best one. Like we've talked about on this podcast, jiu-jitsu is great. I mean, fighting, boxing classes, anything that you can do that puts you into doing something physical. Because I don't think a lot of dudes, at least I hope not, aren't sitting around, let's just go get a drink and talk about our emotions. Right? That doesn't happen. But what happens is like, hey, let's lift weights. And as I'm training, you have a conversation that might be a little bit heavier than normal. you know, and I think a lot of those things happen during those type of things, you know, more so than, you know.
And we've had this conversation before about how men become more insular in their with age. For me though, being surrounded by, and you were in the locker room with your teammates with the SEALs, I did still value my alone time, because when you're around guys 24/7, some guys love that. Hey, we're done with practice. Let's go to the bar. Let's go party. It was like, hey, no, I'm good. And I think a lot of people need to find the ability to love themselves before they can ever truly love other people. And it took me until I was 40 to figure that out.
Did plant-based medicine help you with that?
Oh, we're going there. Okay. Well, closing back, if you don't know what is DEXA scan, it's spelled DEXA. Just put it in your search engine. You can find DEXA scans in your local area.
And they also have trucks that drive around. Like we had a portable DEXA guy show up. And what I really like about them is you lay on them and they kind of show you right to left. So you'll see kind of your outline when you lay on the bed. And you can kind of see some imbalances. Actually, I was able to, you're not supposed to use it for this, but one of our athletes, I diagnosed his curvature of the spine. He had scoliosis based upon what I could see in the DEXA, which ended up leading us down a completely different path to having it dealt with, and then also, putting a bunch of rehab protocols in place to manage it. And we didn't necessarily know until I saw the DEXA, and I was like, oh, shit. And he's like, is this a problem? I'm like, yeah, it's a tremendous problem. We got to fix this. So that just came from us doing, and the guys that I train twice a year get a DEXA scan, just so that we know we're headed on the right path, where all of a sudden, visceral fat becomes an issue as people age. And, as you know, there's two types of fat. There's visceral fat, what packs around the organs, and then there's subcutaneous fat, which is like the jiggly fat around your waist. One is dramatically better than the other. Oh,
visceral is one. A lot of data shows heart disease, cardiac. Yeah.
Well, and everybody remembers somebody's dad, or maybe, you see a guy that just has that like iron massive gut, like that huge beer gut where you're like, and it's just hard. That's visceral fat packing around your organs. That is like a surefire recipe for heart attack and all the other myriad of cancers and whatnot, and illnesses that tend to
fast track
to strip us of our life later
6 feet under.
Yeah.
So you bring up arrhythmia, and for the group, just to give a little context here, John and a few other of our friends were supposed to go to arrhythmia. We did. John, for damn good reasons, had to cancel the morning of.
Well,
I was disheartened.
I'll be transparent. My wife had breast cancer and got diagnosed in June, and then decided to just have a mastectomy. So she had the mastectomy, and then she went back in December and had the reconstruction done, and ended up like something wasn't right when she got out of the hospital, and ended up being a staph infection. So all of a sudden, Friday, I'm picking her up from the hotel, or I'm sorry, from the hospital with staph infection, getting the kids, trying to manage all this. And I'm like, we're supposed to leave at 7 a.m. on Saturday morning, and I'm at the hospital at 9 o'clock, and I'm like, I don't think I'm going to make this. And she's like, no, you should totally go. And I'm like, I would not have a clear mind to be able to go down to Costa Rica and go through this whole transformational experience, knowing that you were just in the hospital less than 10 hours ago with staph infection after dealing with it. And I wanted to go. I was excited to go, just for the mere fact that it felt like, remember Star Trek, where they were to go where no man has gone before, and this. It's really not something I've ever done. So to be able to have this experience in this great place, and I saw the arrhythmia stuff, I'm like, dude, this is neat. I've never done this. Let's go. And I didn't get to go. And then Mike went with Shanji and some of the other guys.
Yeah. And so for the audience, Sanjay Ribeiro, who's known as the Michael Jordan of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because he's won more world championships than almost anyone, who is the nicest guy just the most loving guy in the world, man.
He's great.
I always love how the most deadly guys in the world are usually the nicest guys in the world.
Yeah.
And then just by coincidence, Shep Rose, who is, 10 seasons, Southern Charm. It's a Bravo TV series. I met him shortly after, I think, yoga. We did yoga next to each other on the first day, and he's a fun-loving, good-hearted guy. And I partly recognized him because I'm not a Bravo TV channel guy.
Yeah.
I'm forced.
What channel is Bravo? I don't even know.
Bravo is all the reality TV. It's the wives, the real wives of Orange County, or all the other things. And my wife watches it religiously.
Okay.
When she does watch TV, and I'd recognize a guy, and I'm like, hey, because we went to breakfast, I'm like, I know you from somewhere. He's like, yeah, I'm on TV. And I'm like, yep, that's it. Bravo. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, hey, I'll be in your documentary. So he filled in. We got to know him really well.
Badass.
But it was, you had 3 very different views from the experience at Rhythmia. So let me preface this. The resort is beautiful. Yeah. Everything is well run. The food, and even Will, who wasn't going through the ayahuasca because he was filming the documentary. And we've got a documentary coming out probably in a few months, directed by Will and Mark Pattison, who's an NFL player, Emmy Award-winning director, mountaineer, did all 7 summits. But the food was a change. It was almost like going vegan. And they had fish, but the fish was like tilapia. Ugh. And I'm not a tilapia. It's like, what are they called? The cockroach?
I was going to say the trash of the sea.
The trash of the sea. And then some chicken. So you're still so hungry. You're just piling all the vegetables and fruits on. And like everyone's stomach was just tore up, even like a week after we had gotten back. But I think I was the most sort of on the fence about whether it was for me or not. Well, Sanjay loved it.
But you already had an experience where you went down into the Abigail.
Yeah, it was basically, Abigail was like being in a mosh pit with guys your size for 8 hours, just getting rocked.
But like, I mean, you cleared through a lot of whatever deep trauma that you had that you brought on, and, were able to kind of cleanse through that. So I don't know if like all of a sudden, like this is news to me. I know people that have been to Rhythmia like 25 times.
Oh, there were. Repeat. And that's $8,000 a pop.
One of my friends has gone, like, I think it's one of the guys I know has gone like between 2 to 4 times a year for like multiple years. He goes every quarter and has this like, and I'm like, what is the next time teach you with this? And like, it's really, I was like, oh my God, I kind of figured it was like kind of like a once in a lifetime experience. Like you do once, you go sit with Mother Ayahuasca. She tells you what you need to do. You go out and then make the change. I didn't know you had to go back and revisit her every quarter, which is about as often as I see my mom.
Different strokes for different folks. If it works for you, great. No judgment here. And I'm not judging.
So this is another issue. I feel like a lot of people that are drawn to this are trying to battle some demon trauma in their past. And this allows them to kind of work through this. And I don't know if, like, as I've gone through, like, kind of like the survivor stories of, like, and I was trying to do a bunch of research on the ayahuasca, it felt like people were drawn to this because they needed to purge something. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I didn't really have I had a great childhood. Great parents, like, nothing weird happened to me. Anything I ever did that was reckless was probably at my own hand. Mm. I think when you take that level, but I would have been fascinated to go see, I wasn't going there because of this trauma and I need to fix this and this is the only way out because a lot of people are drawn to it.
Yeah.
I was more like literally Star Trek where it's like
explore the unknown.
Yeah.
And I think that was the same for me, and you're going with friends. So it'll be a good time. But let me say this, you do 4 consecutive nights of ayahuasca. And after the first night, we had very similar backgrounds. Parents were great, dude. Were they stern at times? Because I freaking needed it.
Yeah,
I was not a good teenager.
I'm an asshole.
Yeah, and war. I'm going to tell you, on the first night, I took 2 cups of ayahuasca. Did I see some things? But
what does it taste like?
It's awful.
It is dirt and.
Let's just say, like, I wanted to vomit right after. It is very earthy. It's very thick. But you have 70 people going through the ceremony with you. And so
70 people paying $8,000 a month.
I know. Business model, right? They have mattresses, clean sheets, everything is clean about the place, and all 70 people take a mattress. And so, I mean, you're in close proximity. I think I would have liked something more intimate.
So they're making 700. I mean, it's not exactly 700, but it's round up to 10.
Yeah.
So they're making $700K there in a week.
But I couldn't tell you what their OpEx is.
Oh, well, I mean, just looking at the pictures, and I mean, like it's not probably costing them $700,000 to do it. But I mean, what does it cost them to probably run it? Maybe 50, 100?
With all the salaries, I'd probably bank around 200,000, maybe 3 a week, because they bring in guest speakers and they run a great curriculum. And the 2 guys that run it, JJ, and I'm forgetting the other guy who was really fit, Dwayne. They do it in a comedic way. So I really appreciated that. But when you get into it, you have 70 people and you've got the guy on the mattress next to you vomiting. which is, you know, they're like, oh, well, you just got to block that out. I'm like, he's vomiting right next to me. That all you hear is that repeat. Yeah. And he's doing it like the whole night. So you do have the option of going outside, and they've got like the area fenced off, and they've got all these support people that I called the orderlies because eventually they were running after people. They actually had to restrain somebody. But after the first night, and at the end of it, it's like 1:30 in the morning. That's when it concludes. And then they share for an hour. And the whole time I'm just like, I just want to go back to my room.
Yeah.
But I realized, I'm like, I don't need this. I didn't want to abandon Shep and Sanjay. So I did the next 2 nights. And on the third night, after the third night, I'm like, hey guys, I'm not going to do the fourth. There's no point.
Yeah.
But
did you have any interesting interaction? Did Mother Ayahuasca visit you or anything strange?
No.
Oh, fuck.
And not really. I mean, you see shapes, colors, you go into the dream state. I think I metabolized it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But it was funny. I got to tell the story. I mean, as we talk about, you know, men and masculinity, it finally hit me, and I'm probably getting this from somewhere where we hear toxic masculinity all the time. What about divine masculinity? And the second night,
that's us, right? I think toxic masculinity is men who have subverted being masculine. So kind of this idea where they're like, oh, like alpha male, and you hear these like stones cast with this like toxic masculinity stuff. I think that there's an extremely disingenuous version of it, because I see this shit all the time. Like I just got sent, I'll just give you a social media one, right? Somebody sent a video of this guy that was basically talking about like warriors like us and have gone to battle and the whole thing. And the guy didn't serve in the military. And the guy's never fought. He's not like, I mean, like what battles are you discussing? What are you, a veteran of the culture war? Like, it's just I think people have imagined themselves on what masculinity is. And I have a firm place on what I think it is. You know, it's mentorship. It's, following through on your word. Like if you're going to father children, raise your children. You know, if your father passes away, I mean, I talked on this podcast recently. I believe that the two most impactful things for men is one, when they father children, and two, when you lose your own father, where now all of a sudden you don't have that lifeline to call your dad. And now all of a sudden you become that lifeline for somebody else, or you realize that you have to say goodbye to this person, and now you filled this role. So for me, having children, was like getting married just felt like dating with paperwork, right? It's like you're dating, like they live at your house, you share stuff, like it's just like a more advanced form of dating. The minute the kids show up, all of a sudden you're like, okay, now we just went to this is serious, because now we're forever bonded, because this thing till it's 18 years old, graduation, I'm going to see you for the rest, hopefully see you forever. So marriage to me took a completely different stance with kids versus being married. And then all of a sudden you lose your father, and you're like, okay, I've fathered these kids, and these are my responsibility to raise these kids to be competent, intelligent, well-rounded adults. And why do people fail at this? I really think it comes from being selfish. If you're a selfish individual, just don't have kids, because kids are the most selfish thing, and you can't have two selfish people in relationships. As you know, being married, you have to, if you're a super selfish person, your wife better be very giving. If she's selfish, you better be giving, because you can't have two selfish people in the deal. So then once you have kids, you have to figure this, that it's not about you, it's about them, it's about raising them, all this other stuff. And then all of a sudden, you have an issue or whatever, you call your dad, hey dad, what do you think about this? Well, here's how I did it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you don't have your dad to call, and you realize you're like, shit, I'm playing without a goalie. So for me, and I talked about on this podcast, those were two impactful things that I think affected me and should affect other men. But then you realize that once your dad's not there, and not that you need your dad for this, but the idea of mentorship, and more importantly, offering kind words or, direction to people that might need it or might be in an interesting place. And, when I got my blue belt in jits, Shanji and Victor were both there, belted me, and Shanji said, since my older brother is gone, because he had his older brother, Salo, with him, Salo went back to this. He's like, I've kind of hoped that we would have another older brother to be able to help us and mentor us. And when John came into our life, it felt like we found another older brother, somebody who had played in the NFL and did this. And he's like, I handed these young fighters over for him to mentor. And I realized that the job that he's doing is better than I could have ever hoped for these kids. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, yeah, because, not only am I a dad, but I see the potential they have and I want them to maximize their potential. And I realized that like the selfishness when I was growing up of I want to be the best. I want to be the best. And, iron sharpens iron, but I'm sharpening my iron because I want it to be sharp. Then all of a sudden you flip this whole thing. And now I'm the iron that's sharpening, that they need to beat on so that they sharpen their iron. And I'm not overly concerned with how sharp I am. I just know that my iron needs to be extremely dense and present and, ready to go at all times to keep those kids' blades sharp.
Yeah.
And it's for my own kids. It's for these. And like, you kind of get into this weird, like I was so used to being mentored and having people this and this. And then all of a sudden you flip this and I realize, I'm like, shit, this is my role. And is it really about me as much? No, it's about what these kids are able to do. And, my ability to see, what they're doing. And then they ask, and they'll be like, hey, what do you think about this? And I'll be like, hey, this is what I think you should do. And more importantly, this is what I think that, if we're trying to go in this direction, this is how we get there. These are the things we need to be. This is what being a professional is. So my daughter the other day, she's so funny. She dropped a bomb on me. She's like, I kind of finally figured out what a father is. And I was like, oh, lay this one on me. She's like, you guys are grumpy and you just give advice. She's like, you're either giving us advice or you're grumpy. And she's like, why are you grumpy all the time? I'm like, because you're not listening. And she's like, and I'm like, that's like the job of the father. So we found that little, like, the meme of the guy from, what is it? From the dragons, the hand of the queen of the mother of dragons, the little Peter deal where he's like, I drink and I know things. So my daughter's like, you know things and you're grumpy. Like, was just like this funny exchange we had. But I'm like, Jamie, I like to laugh and joke as much as possible. But at the end of the day, like a lot of the times where I'm trying to like mentor you or I'm there's times to fuck around and joke. And believe me, as you know me, I fucking joke around as much as anybody. But at certain points when things are very serious, like there's a time to work and there's a time to be serious. And if I'm trying to give you sage advice that allows you to go and make good choices in the world, like tune in and listen to it. I'm not doing it to hear myself speak. I got a podcast for that.
Yeah.
And so, with Shanji, part of me inviting him and why I was excited to go was I see he's such a good person. He's so talented, but there's some inherent character flaws that he I talked to him about. And I'm like, hey, dude, if you could, and it's purely things that only I see because I know him in the way that I do. And he's, one of the best jiu-jitsu players in the world and has taught me so much. And I'm like a student every time he teaches and this, but like when we get into life in terms of like raising his daughter and these things and what he wants from business and that, like, dude, I've done all this and I see some of the shortcomings. So this ayahuasca thing is I was really hoping that we could go and he could have the experience to where he sees what I see. And I was like, dude, you're such a talented person. You're such a bright star. The things that you're doing are reducing that shine. So if you could just change these things a little bit. And I wondered if like the ayahuasca journey would be the perfect place for it. Because the minute I talk to him on this, he gets uncomfortable and leaves, which I like to have uncomfortable conversations. A lot of people don't want to have uncomfortable conversations. So I was really happy. And then when I saw him, and then he hit me up and he had just got back. I went up and saw him and he called me and he's like, you coming to class? I'm like, no. He's like, dude, come. Because I'm leaving tomorrow. I want to talk to you about it. And when I saw him, it was as if he had DH'd like 20 years. He like looked so much younger, like a huge weight had come off of him. And I saw him and I was like, dude, it reminded me of Lord of the Rings, you remember? Where like the Sarion is like in that king and then they pull him out and he comes back. I was like, whatever was weighing you down, you've lost. Or you've ditched. And he's like, I made peace with, my family and my brother and all these things. And like, I'm ready to move forward. And I'm like, dude, I can't wait. Like, come back. We'll go to dinner. We'll talk about it. What's the game plan? I'm here for, I'm here to support you in anything you need to do. And I think a lot of times, that's all people need to hear. Like, I believe in you. I support you. What do you want to do? 100 miles an hour. If we're going to sprint that way, let's run 100 miles an hour. Whatever you want to do, I'm there. I believe in you as an individual. Whereas I feel like a lot of people, and I'm sure you've run into this too, are only around you because they think it can benefit them. Whereas what I look for is not how you benefit me, but like how I can serve and benefit you, how I can help sharpen you and see you be your best version. And I realized like when that little bit of mind switch for me, all of a sudden everything just seems to happen better and things happen. And like all of a sudden you're there and like, like, wow, man, I really wanted this thing, like this and this. And, I'm not going to be ultra specific, but things that I wanted to do all of a sudden just came to me, not because I wasn't chasing them, but because I just came to help other people.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking of a certain group that is exactly like that. It's how do you benefit me? And I just, again, like I'm getting better about not judging people and just, hey, that's just not for me. It's not the group I want to be around. But with Sanjay, not knowing him before we went and knowing his social presence, we had some conversations. And basically what I said to him is, I'm like, bro, you're so low in modesty, high in modesty, high in humility. I'm like, you've got to flip that equation. Keep the humility there, but come down in modesty. You're one of the best Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioners, competitors in the history of the sport.
Yeah.
And you're such a nice guy, and you're impacting the world. But think if you didn't hold back anymore. And he's like, yeah, you're right. And you could tell.
Well, but that's a kind of, so there's a difference between martial artists and grapplers and this whole thing, So Shanji's core is a martial artist. And, there's like, if you think about like Bushido and like all of like, the Book of Five Rings and all of like these, I guess I'll use the word tenets, which I always liked that word. And then the Liver King started using the word tenets for his ancestral tenets. And all of a sudden I just like shied away from that word.
By the way, it seems like he's disappeared.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Like herpes on spring break.
Why would you ever say that you don't use performance enhancing drugs when clearly you do? It was insane.
Yeah, he was a crazy person. I thought when I originally saw and not to get too far off the rail, when I originally saw the Liver King, I thought it was a spoof. I thought he was just playing a character. I thought it was just like a manufacturer, and it was. But I thought it was just like it was a tongue-in-cheek humor thing. I didn't realize that like he was legitimately playing this character, and I just figured he was like being just, I don't know, making fun of people, like making fun of this kind of like CrossFit primal world, and he was just kind of a spoof. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen there's a video of a guy, and I think it's like Fit to Serve. He's like super heavy, like real fat. And he like does these spoof videos on CrossFit. Like, goes in with his shirt off and he's like, hey, I'm ready to do. And the hilarious part is he's been doing it for a long time and has actually gotten in worse shape, which I just thought he would have gotten in better shape just by the fact that he was just pretending to do the work. I mean, he's there in the gym. Like, they're doing the videos, like he's doing some of the movements. You would think he would be in better shape as just being as osmosis, being around these people. And he's actually in worse shape. But I thought, like, it's obviously a spoof thing. He's making fun of the CrossFit and all. He's like, yeah, I'm about to make CrossFit Games. I think it's hysterical. I thought the Liver King was in that same vein. And then I was like, oh, shit, this guy's really serious? People are buying into this? And people bought into it. And I was like, and then when he said he was natural, I'm like, come on, dude. And then, and then he gets roasted by that more plates, more dates.
We were having this conversation before the podcast, but, I think, one, he had a massive following.
Oh,
I was not one of them.
Yeah, well, he didn't speak to me, but there's a lot of...
I think people like watching train wrecks.
100%.
But, we can name people, and I don't want to name people. It's just, like, don't put anyone on a pedestal. And
so I made a shirt years ago that said, don't have heroes. And for that very reason. But
have mentors. Have coaches.
Yeah, or people you look up to.
Yeah.
Sean, and to bring us back towards Shanji a little bit, he at his core, and it's really interesting, like being around him as much as I have over the last year, like the way he treats his dojo, like, like the school. I'll use a dojo, but it's really, he calls it a school. Like, in terms of like the respect of the mat and like the environment and everything. And like when you show up, how you line up and this and belt and this. And it was funny the other day, there was a new guy, an intro class, and they gave him too long a belt and his shit was all messed up. And as Shanji was talking, I could see he was trying to teach something. And I could tell that like the guy had his gi, like normally, basically it's like left over, left, and then you put your right over the top, you tie your belt. And there's like very high attention to detail in how you like tie your belt in the uniform and just everything. And the guy was like, everything was backwards. And I could see Shanji like it was like he's trying to teach, he's going over something, and like I could see it, and so I just stopped, and I was like, yo, dude, and I untied his belt and I got him, and basically Shanji's like, dude, that's what black belts do. And I'm like, no, that just means like I saw you about to flip out, and I'm here for fucking class, and I knew that I could short circuit this by just doing what's right. And so I don't know if you have to be a black belt to do what's right, but like at the end of the day, we got a lifeboat. Everybody needs to get on and be ready to go. So it was, and then he was like, thank you. That was really bothering. I'm like, oh no, I saw it. believe me, it was
I'm
bothering
sure the
me
guy
too.
appreciated it.
Yeah, because like you don't want to look like an idiot, and like the instructor is this guy who's and Shanji, like it was funny because he had been there because he'd been traveling a little bit. We were doing warm ups. He literally we didn't really do much in class because he retaught all the warm ups. This is how you do this. This is how you do this. You guys have gotten sloppy. The attention to detail. And I told him, I'm like, dude, the basics are never unsexy, and you can never be good enough. I've never met anybody that was good enough at the basics. So the fact that he completely derailed the class to reteach the basics and to show his attention to detail, I mean, this guy doesn't have to do that. And it's just so good. I'm forever a student of him and Victor and these guys, which are, my athletes, and I train them in this. I mean, but like at the, and I go to their classes and they instruct me. But at the end of the day, like Shanji is he's my instructor. He's my teacher. He's the guy for jiu-jitsu, and he's so good. And, he is, and that's what I said, because he's a martial artist, he's so humble and good. Whereas, a lot of these grapplers, the Gordon Ryans and Nicky Rods and B Team and, New Wave and all this. I mean, there's so much shit talking in this whole thing. You don't hear these guys do any of it.
I just don't have any energy for it. But I know once Sanjay's back in town, we'll get you back out here to get him on the podcast.
Yeah.
And we got Shep Rose coming as well.
Nice.
So the four of us will talk about Rhythmia. I expect great things from Sanjay. And he really bought in, and he really looked healed. But I got to tell you this one story, and then back to the divine masculinity. Will was there. He didn't hear the debrief. So I wish I could bring videos into the ceremonies. So again, like I said, I metabolized it very quickly. And the second night, like, it became a shit show. And I basically created a sociology around the ceremonies and where people fell into their respective tribes. So you had the lawn people.
The what?
The lawn.
The lawn?
The grass people.
Okay.
And they would just go lay on the grass, and you'd see them like almost swimming in the grass. You had the sky people. Those are the people that went to the hammocks. I was with the sky people, and I knew what hammock to get, and I would just observe everything. You got the White Walkers, people that just walk back and forth the whole time. You got the Crazy Joes, the homeless guy who's just yelling things out. Yeah. You got the repeaters that then repeat what they say, like "fuck you," "no, fuck you," and you had the pukers, you had the people that just comatose, passed out. It was hilarious to watch. It does make you, given our situation, and what I mean by situation is we've just been fortunate to not have much trauma.
Man, people
in life.
I've met a lot of people that have, have a lot of trauma, and they use all these other means to manage it and run from it and this. And it's like, dude, I've never faulted anybody for for counseling or these, or, you go on these different.
Not at all. That's actually a sign of strength.
Yeah, it is.
Courage.
The fact that you have, I have never really gone through any like formal counseling or any of that stuff. In the NFL, we had like a performance guy we talked to, and, we'd get into some other stuff, but his thing was more about like maximizing Sunday, like what's preventing you from being the best thing. And I had a guy on the podcast actually yesterday who is a performance coach. And as we were talking, the pieces that he is for his program were almost identical to the guy I worked with, a guy named Kevin Elko. And he's like, man, like, like just all of these little changes in mindset. And as we were talking, I was like, shit, this is like, I did this work when I was a young NFL player, and it's helped shape a lot of these things for me. And he works with professional baseball players. But the trauma that people have and the baggage that they carry, whatever you have to do to release yourself of that trauma and that baggage, and if it's going and, doing something like this plant-based medicine deal, like I always thought it was fucking hippy dippy, Berkeley-esque, because I went to Berkeley.
Because we both are from that area. Yeah.
Hate Ashbury, Grateful Dead, hippie bullshit that just a bunch of dirty hippies that want to do drugs and go to People's Park and fucking Burning Man. When we had Dan Engel on this podcast, that completely changed my entire mindset. When he talked about like the reducing of the size of the amygdala, that like, as you age, your brain becomes more partitioned. When you look at kids, their brains light up at all times when we get into these partitions, and like the restructuring of like the neurology of the brain after doing these different plant-based medicine things, I looked at it almost as like, is this performance enhancing? Because this sounds performance enhancing. This will make me a better version. So that was my big thing, was like, I wasn't going to heal any trauma. I was going because I wanted to figure out, like, is this performance enhancing?
The realization, and all 70 people get to know each other pretty well, the way they direct the curriculum, if you want to say, or the schedule. But, and you're all going through a little bit of hardship together. I think my healing was recognizing that, hey, I don't have it all that bad. Like, anything that is trauma in my life is self-induced at this point. And like, I've got an amazing wife. I've got 2 beautiful kids. I had parents that love me. And it was cathartic in that way. Rhythmia impacts a lot of lives. They're doing good work. Yeah. But the funny thing is, it's a very internal journey as well. There's 3 core questions. Show me who I've become, which is what you do in the first night. Merge me back with my soul. And then I'm forgetting the last one. Heal my heart. And so if you notice me, my, it's supposed to be a very personal journey. On the second night, while everyone's sharing, Shep's standing next to me. And this woman, you could tell she's got a UK accent, lived in LA. And we smoothed the bridge, but everyone is sharing things about things they discovered about their childhood or trauma, or, hey, I lost my fiance, and very moving. And then the very last person on Tuesday night, she's like, I just came out of my state, and I just want to say to all you rich, powerful men here with your white privilege and toxic masculinity, you are killing the world and global warming, and you have power and you won't use it to heal other people, and just went on a tirade. And Shep leans in and says, where the hell is she going with this? I'm like, I have no idea. And it was a total buzzkill for everyone in the room. Yeah. So, and everyone actually, like, a great experience. Everyone, well, especially the guys, and we had one Marine, retired Master Sergeant. Everyone left and went back to their rooms. And the next day it was sort of like, hey, was that off-putting to you? And so, no one wanted to confront her. In one of the group prep sessions for the third night, Sanjay knew I was going to say something. He steps up and he does it very eloquent about, hey, I try to represent, we come together as one, and we're here as a community and focus on ourselves to make the group better.
He speaks perfect English, unless it benefits him to not speak perfect English. And then he speaks in this kind of Brazilian,
almost Hawaiian.
I've heard him do it. And he does it to me, because he's always like, comma, which means like calm down, slow, comma. And, we have like mais uma, which is one more. And, mais braço, which is another, so we have all these different little words, but he's always, whenever he sees me, he's like, comma. And he does this. I think it's genius, because it's almost puts him as this like all-knowing Brazilian shaman, jiu-jitsu guy. And I'm like, shut the fuck up.
He does have the makings of a shaman.
He does. He does. He is a cult leader at his, and I use that not derogatory, but, for a lot of people, martial arts, jiu-jitsu, and what he's done in terms of, like, not only is he a good-looking dude, well-spoken, he is extreme. He's so good in his teaching. It's almost slightly emasculating. It's so good. Like, we've rolled, and he's so, like, as I thought I was doing good, he's like, oh, you're doing great, keep doing that. And then it's like, nope, you're not doing good. And then he like flip you over, and you're like, fuck, dude, I thought I was doing good, and now I'm not doing good. And he's like, okay, do this. And he's like coaching you as he's smashing you. And like, it's fucking weird, but he's the perfect guy for it. Like, I imagine Shanji would have left there with like 70 people,
he did.
69 people's phone number. Yeah. Like they at some point were like cheering him and carrying him off, and he becomes everybody's demigod.
And one of the other things this woman had said was like, capitalism, and it's killing everything, and you capitalist pigs. And so I go after Shanji, and I'm trying to be as, graceful as possible and say, hey, we're all here for a reason, to heal ourselves, to be the best version of ourselves. And I'm just putting this out there again. And I said, hey, when it comes to the debrief time, why don't we just keep it focused on us as individuals during the debrief, and not berating or downplaying people you don't know. And just for fact, for every toxic male, there's probably a toxic female. It really is person dependent. And also, capitalism was an alternative to feudalism, which comes from London. And people no longer wanted to be a serf under some lord's thumb. Yeah. And it gave them the possibility of social and economic mobility. So I'm putting that out there. Love you all. It's been good to know you all. Sat down. 20 guys. I don't know if you were in the room when that 20 guys came up and they're like, thank you for that. Like, it really bothered me last night and that needed to be said. She came up to me later and said, hey, we are good. Don't worry. We all say things God knows in a somewhat drug induced. And every time I said drug, people would be like, it's not drugs. It's plant-based medicine. I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. They're trying to remove the
stigma.
Yeah.
And no. We had many conversations. She's a nice lady. Just,
well, I think people, there is a social intelligence that people develop over a time. And this social intelligence allows you to kind of reveal different pieces of yourself in front of who the people are. In front of they say that was in the Japanese talk about that idea of like multiple faces, right? So when you show the world, the one they show the people close, like your love is, and then the one you show nobody. I think it's ikigai is what it is. I could be messing.
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But what I really think is that there's a social intelligence to know like who you are and where you fit within the social norm and like what you can say and people. And then what's always interesting is when people either discard it or don't have it. And you're like, wow, I wouldn't have told that story in this group. And they don't, they also are, but also there could be people that are very selfish. I'm here for me. This is my journey. I paid the money and I'm going to get what I want out of this regardless of the other people that are around them. And so that's always, I think, the major crux with things like this is you have people that are extremely selfish. But I wonder if and that's what so there's a book called The Immortality Key that you should check out. It's really like melted my mind because for a long time I was raised Catholic and there's, when people ask you like, are you religious? And I'm like, I'm not religious, but I'm more spiritual at this point just because there were so many questions I had growing up in the Catholic Church with Catholicism that I would ask. And whenever I was asked, I was just shut down. And I asked them like when you hear the stories of Jesus, I remember we were in CCD and I asked them, I'm like, listen to these stories. And I'm like, we're at this church and I see this and this whole thing. And I'm like, would Jesus have even been let in here? Like, would, you ask these questions because he's, the son of a carpenter and, hung with whores and wash the feet of the beggar. And all of a sudden I'm sitting in this thing and gold collection plates are going up and this guy's in these crazy outfits. And I just always felt very disconnected from the myths that they were teaching or the teachings of the Bible. And then also the fact that we never looked at the Bible. We were told not to look to the Bible. You get the Bible from the preacher and then they have hymn books. And then we go to CCD and they would teach and, all these crazy things. And I just always felt disconnected from it. And I never saw God or what I was always waiting for this religious experience. So I was waiting for these things because they tell you, you hear like the born again Christian said, oh my God, I was saved and instantly God flooded me. And I felt this.
Good for them.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's amazing. I never felt it. And I went to, when I was in high school, we went to this born again kind of surface church thing and all these people were getting saved. And I told the dude, I put my hands in his and I was like, I want to be saved. I want to see the light. I want to see what you guys are feeling. And we sit there and he prayed and the whole thing. He's like, did you feel it? I'm like, no, I didn't feel it. I didn't feel the conduit. And these other people had these emotional things and I felt God and I just never felt that. But where I felt whatever this thing is, whether it's a Hindu or whatever, I felt the presence of something greater because I believe that it's much more difficult to be an atheist and say there's nothing than to be somebody that believes that there could be something. Whenever I meet people that are like, there's nothing there, I'm an atheist. I'm like, that's a fucking big commitment.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work. How did you get to this place? And so I just was like, I just never felt what they were whatever they were selling. And I enjoyed the stories. I would always go and want to listen to the stories, and I like listening to the homily and what the teaching of the day was. And
if the person giving the homily is good and comes up with an analogy to modern day, I was raised Catholic and I was an altar boy. I've never been more bored shitless.
Yeah.
But the funny thing about religion is our family is religious. We're spiritual, but it takes on a new meaning when you see combat in your life is on the line. You're like, everyone becomes religious then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people find something, but so my thing was, and then when I would go play football, I'd listen to these guys that were, Bible thumpers and they'd talk about, God, thank you, and God allowed me to do this and this and this. And I'd always tell them, be like, I really think God helps those who help themselves. And on top of it, whoever this person is, like you're given certain gifts. Use those gifts to the best of your ability, right? Like that's like, let's say like the greatest sin you could ever commit was not using the gifts, squander the gifts that God's given you. So when I use this God thing, so I never felt what these people felt. And I'd see people and they would tell me these things and I'm like, like, am I not ready for it? It hasn't entered. And then as I read this Immortality Key, he goes through the preface, like the prelogue of the book, like within the first 3 minutes, he described exactly what I felt as a kid with religion and why it wasn't designed to speak to people like me. And more importantly, when it stopped becoming about God and it became a business, and why and how God was never supposed to be, or whoever, when I say God, I'll just say, hey, like, the spirit of whoever, something bigger, something that interconnects us that we can't see. I always joke that religion is like fighting out who is the best imaginary friend, right? But like this kind of general, like kind of being, we'll just call to a God, the God, whatever, that the Christian mysticism and the connection that the original Christians had, the church looked at and where they were able to get this. Actually, from the sacrament, when they went and they analyzed it, they figured out that it was actually a mix of these two. Like there was a plant that they would use to make their sacrament that had another plant that was a weed that added a psychedelic deal. And there was actually a DMT psychedelic in all of the early Christian sacrament wine. And so that was there. And when they analyzed, and this guy got a chance to go into the Vatican and go into their archives, the shit that they don't put out, and there was accounts from early Christians talking about like their connection with God and their religious experience. Fast forward, there was a study in the 70s at Johns Hopkins where they gave people that were at the stage 4 cancer at the end of their lives,
DMT,
they gave them high amounts of psilocybin. Then they sat with them and they recorded what they felt and what they saw and what they did. And then when this guy sat down, the experiences were identical. And he's like, this was how we, through history with Christian mysticism, how these individuals connected with, this being. And then all of a sudden, when the church came in, two things happened. The old, the tending of this, and more importantly, I forgot the name of it, was always done through women. So women were the makers. All of a sudden, the Catholic Church just butchers women out of everything, and all of a sudden the myth of like the old witch and the old crone, whereas that was always the knowledge, was the encased in the old woman. She was the one that knew how to do this. She tended it. She balanced it. And so then, as I'm reading this thing, the closest I've ever felt to any of this was, and this is hysterical, when I was on that motorcycle ride. We went to San Francisco,
California,
California
about a year ago, right?
Yeah, and we rode from San Francisco on this, bitching thing. I was like locked in the helmet on the bike. We were coming around, and all of a sudden, like the sun hit me, and I was on PCH just south of Redwood City. We'd come through, like the ocean is there, it's breaking, and I'm riding, and I'm like listening to music in the helmet. Like there's nothing around me other than the hum of this bike. I can see like the green, I can see the grass. It like hits me, and like as it hit me, and as I was going through, just kind of carving like 80 miles an hour, there's nothing around, and like it was as close to like a religious experience as I've ever seen, where like I felt like, oh man, I'm part of something bigger. And like that moment on that bike in that moment was, that like what I had hoped for. So as I'm listening to this book, a year later, as I'm prepping for this ayahuasca thing, he's going through exactly what I went through. And then he talked about like your interaction with nature and all of the things that religion was, and especially the connection with God was through nature. So putting it, encasing it into a building,
a church,
and church, and devoiding, there's no plants in there, there's nothing, like this whole thing was like the antithesis. I mean, this was like the anti-peace, because it was all outdoors, it was in nature, and these people are out there drinking this psilocybin, or not DMT, or I forgot what it was, but this sacrament that had these psychedelic properties because it had like a grain in it. And these people would have these incredible religious experiences where God would fill them, and then they knew that they were connected to something, and they called it Christian mysticism, and existed for couple hundred years. And that was where the religion and the cult aspect of Christianity just completely absorbed and dissolved and just basically took over the Roman Empire, to the point where you have Constantine becoming a Christian, and then all of a sudden the Christian, allegedly the Roman Empire falls, but it doesn't. It just figures out like, fuck, dude, we can make way more money as a church if we sell what these people were potentially.
That's human nature. Commercialize something.
So then they became, you can't find God in nature. You can't find God through this sacrament. We are now the conduit for God. You have to talk to us so that we can talk to the big guy for you. Don't read the Bible. Don't do these things. Come in here and like all of the pieces. And I'm listening to this and like my head like pops off. And I was so excited to go do this ayahuasca thing because I'd never really done anything like that. And I'm like, what if this is the religious experience of the ancients that I'm looking for? What if all of a sudden you sit down and somebody sits down next to you and it's like, no, you're on the right path, dude.
Yeah.
Like this is who we are. And more importantly, now you're connected. So then when my wife got, the deal happened with my wife, I had this feeling like maybe this isn't the time. Maybe this is the universe pulling me out of this thing at the 11th hour because this isn't the experience I'm supposed to have. And so while I wanted to do it, I knew that this is a pretty big deal. Like the universe was like, and your wife has staph infection. You got to go. And so like I pull out of it, got to take care of my kids and this and the family. And you guys were very gracious about it. Like take care of your family. But like, it
wasn't even a decision.
I know. But that moment of clarity of realizing like, maybe this isn't my chance. Maybe this isn't the right time. Or maybe this isn't the experience that the universe wants for me. But as I was listening in that book, and you got to go read it, it's the guy that did it never took any of this stuff, but was able as a historian to go in and somehow make friends with the Vatican and to where they analyzed the original chalices and they found the DMT substance. They found the recipes. And when they went back and they looked at it, and it was like there was these two plants they were making it from. There was a vine that was a weed that when they were in balance added this psychedelic property to what they made the sacrament from. And the experiences are like it was that book was as influential as Dan Engel's deal for me.
The immortality key.
Immortality.
Okay,
key.
We'll try to find that and post it.
I started because prepping for this thing, I didn't want to just like show up like fucking 6 guns. Let's fucking go. I heard there's a beach. Let's take some shit. I didn't want to be that dude. And I had a feeling like there's many times in this world that I've been that dude. And I wanted to like respect it, like the people were bringing us there, and I saw the opportunity to have an experience. And I'd been listening to like different books and reading all these things and trying to like prepare myself because I felt like if you do a little prep work, maybe I'll know a little bit more, right? And so when I listened to that Mortality Key, like literally the first 3 minutes, if you listen to the first 3 minutes of that book, I bought the book, wasn't reading it fast enough, so then I just went and listened to it. So every time I'm in the car, like you see me listen, I was listening to it. But that first 3 minutes, you will listen and be like, holy shit, that's my experience with Catholicism. Like this was the exact questions I had where you're sitting there, we're taught in this world to ask questions. And if something doesn't look right, see something, say something. But yet the minute that you would raise your hand and I would ask a question, they would literally shoot you down, make you feel stupid and tell you, you know what? You don't believe. You have no faith. And somehow because you don't believe and you don't have faith, because think about this. Right, that's like, for example, your employer being like, hey, I just put your paycheck in your bank account. Okay, great. Are you ever going to check your bank account? And then you call them up and you're like, hey, yeah, that money's not in there. Do you not have faith? Well, no, you said you were going to do it. The money's not there. You don't trust us? And you're like, okay, I trust you. And you wait a little longer and you check again. And the money's still not there. And you're like, okay, dude, I trusted you for a little, but like make good on what you're doing. So for religion, a lot of times they were telling us all these things. And I would be like, how do we know? Like he says, like, oh, you don't have faith. You don't do this. You're not a believer. And they would chastise us, and then you just eventually just stop asking questions and pretending, because it's easier than asking these hard questions and having them belittle you as a kid. So I just would go. We would sit, and my mom would be like, "Hey, keep your 4 stands, 3 sits, 2 kneels out the door," and then we go get we'd go to McDonald's and get a sausage egg McMuffin thing or whatever the fuck we would get. And my mom knew it, and we would be in 44, 45. To the point where I'd be like, 44 minutes, he's running long. 4 stands, 3 sits, 2 kneels. And we would get communion and walk right out the back.
I didn't even like the setting of, we always went to 9:30 Mass on Sunday, and it was like everyone was trying to show their best face of the family. But
we were 7:30.
It was 7:30?
Yeah, we were 7:30, and we were out by like 8:20. And that was our deal. And my dad would want to go out and have a donut and like wait for and we'd be like, I'm not going to talk to this fucking old dude. Like and the other thing that tripped me out was that's not even their names. So they have a name. When they go to the parish, they get given a name.
Yeah.
So Father John wasn't Father John. And then he goes to a different parish, he becomes a different one. Now, if that isn't trying to cover your tracks for some shady shit, I don't know what it is. And then the Catholic Church, you know, basically knowingly hurts children and moves these priests around and does a lot of stuff, which, you know, I mean, we put money in the plate.
You can't hide from that one.
No, you can't. And they've done that for a long, long time. You know, they always talk about, like, why do altar boys have parts in the middle of their hair? You know, that one, like, good boy. I mean, there's all of these jokes. As a Catholic, we would tell that were rooted because this was a real deal. And so this was, so I mean, this was like a huge problem for me. You know, our kids are baptized, and my wife's always like, how come we don't go to church? And I'm like, you know, we'll go for like Easter and holidays and this, and we kind of go because it's, you know, it's part of the tradition in this. But my issue more comes down to not like the practice, it's the structured religion created by people as a potential vehicle to sell you something, and basically like the Joel Osteen's flying around on his private helicopter, you know, and he buys the Astrodome, you know. I mean, that shit just it's disingenuous to me.
I think when it comes to raising kids, you are better off reinforcing leadership principles, attributes, characteristics into, as you said earlier, you know, you want to grow your kids into competent, kind, empathetic, respectful human beings who contribute to society, don't detract, and then cherry picking certain verses of the Bible. Iron sharpens iron as one man sharpens another. No greater love than to give one's life for thy brother. And reinforcing lessons around that. Then, I mean, you read the Bible, sometimes you're like, what the hell are they talking about?
But I mean, and there's two completely different gods. If you read the Old Testament versus the New Testament, you know, you have a God that was, you know, you eat meat on Fridays, and all of a sudden, you know, we're gonna, you know, you're gonna have boils for 100 years, and then there's this, you know, other God and the Son of God, and then also the fact that, like, and I asked this question at 10 years old, you know, before we went, like when we were in our like, you know, past First Communion confirmation deal, where I'm like, would all of this change if there was a man who would taught these things, who was just a nice man named Jesus that we're talking about? Like, why did, like,
who wouldn't even hold the mass in the church?
Yeah. How, like, would it be any different if he wasn't actually God? Because they had this whole weird thing where he's the Son of God and he's the Holy Spirit, but he's also God. And he, like, it was just this, like, really confusing. I'm like, so wait a minute. So then why did he pray to, you know, like the night before, you know, he gets taken for the crucifixion. He goes and he prays, like, Father, do you want me to do this? You know, he asks his father, so he's praying to himself. I say, that sounds weird. Like, if I call my dad and ask him, hey, Dad, you want me to do this? I'm not asking myself, I want you to do this. I'm asking you. And then the Holy Spirit comes to him, but that's also him too. So what happened was, I think that they had to, like, basically bring all these things in-house. And then also the other one is some of the books are written, you know, they cherry-pick the books. So, I mean, you know, they had the Council of Nicaea, right? And they decided that, hey, these are the books. But then if you look at the Ethiopian Bible, they have the Book of Enoch that doesn't exist. And there were books written by women. But then also, because of that, they just basically, like, hated women. And the only women in the Bible are what, like old women or hookers. You know, like, it's crazy to me. And for a Jewish man to be 33 years old with no kids and no wife,
you're
ostracized.
Absolutely.
Right? The reason that the Jewish people have survived as a culture as long, you know, through eternity is because their attention to family, marriage, and children, and like that's like their key fundamental. So a 33-year-old man shows up and he's not married with no kids, like, dude, he would be ostracized out of the community. You know, and it's weird, dude. So
religion is do I consider myself faithful? I do. Do I consider myself religious? Do I go to church like a good Catholic should?
Like I always imagine for people like you that in battle.
What do you mean, people like me?
Like, I meant like SEALs, like guys that like door kickers. I don't mean people like
you. People.
What I do mean you people. I mean people that were like tip of the spears door kickers that have, in a moment's notice, make the decision to basically take a life or save a life.
But there's something very spiritual about war as well.
Oh, I believe it.
And not Iraq, but Afghanistan. I remember patrolling, and it's got to be like 1 a.m. It's a full moon, which means we go in a less kinetic area because we're backlit. But you've got the Hindu Kush Mountains, and I lean back to a junior officer named Matty, and I'm like, bro, look at that. You're never going to see anything more beautiful, or you're never going to do anything cooler than this when you get out. And now he's in investment banking, and I'm sure he'd agree. But
I mean, think about this. Like as Andy Stump used to love to tell me all the time, your trenches were mock trenches, and you played mock battles, just pushing men around, other fat men in a game. And I said 100%. Like that's why I've always been so cognizant and like prickly whenever I would sit in meetings and they would try to use these like wartime battle, like we're going to war, we're going to battle, fighting, this, and I'd be like, whoa. Like this is mock battles, right? Like I was the guy who was raising my hand and being like, coach, like I don't know if you should be saying this because like this is disingenuous. Like, I mean, we're not going out there like, half of us are going out, half of us are coming back. I'm like, come on, dude. So I was always very cognizant of like, dude, I play a game where I get to put on fancy uniforms and go push fat guys around for 3 hours while people get drunk and cheer. Like, let's not like pretend this is anything more. This isn't war. This isn't this, because there's really people doing that stuff. So I never made illusions about what I did. I loved the shit out of what I did because I got to fuck people up for 3 hours every Sunday in front of millions of people, and it was the best job in the world because I got paid money to literally one-on-one fist fight a dude. Fucking greatest job in the world. But for individuals like you guys, and part of the reason I've always had, and I have a very special relationship with a lot of with Naval Special Warfare, having worked as a contractor and a lot of my friends, and at the end of the day, I never had to go in harm's way. They did, and so I respect anybody that has. And the fact that you are in a moment's notice have to make a decision between taking a life to save a life, like, hey, it's me and my boys, these people are going to hurt us, let's end them before they hurt us because I have these other guys to defend. And that's an incredible responsibility to have to make, and one that as many times as I've told myself that I can make that decision no problem, like hands down. Like I was in, there's been numerous situations where friends of mine have been in bad situations, and I'm like, if we have to literally take scalps for us to get out alive, I'll take all these scalps and I'll gladly wear them. So I know that situation that like I've trained and we've worked, and these are my people and these aren't our people, and my people have to go home. But it's still an incredible responsibility to be put on you. And that religious piece of like, am I doing the right thing in this moment? Because what's crazy is there's people on the other side that are praying to a different God that feel that they're justified too. Mm-hmm. It's like when you watch All Quiet on the Western Front, when the German guy, is all of a sudden crosses himself, and they're, it's done from the German side, and they're the good guys. So, I mean, everybody believes that they have this righteousness, that we're on the side of God, we're on the side of like the right. And it's purely based on where you grew up, where you were born, which you have no control
over.
What ideology you fed. And more importantly, which imaginary friend you believe is the right one in the sky.
So, to your coach, to the point,
you didn't think this podcast was going to go down this fucking road,
not at all. I'm sure we have pissed off all the theologists. I'm sure we're going to get some dirty notes. That's fine. It's our views. We're not projecting it on anyone else.
No, I mean this is two dudes sitting at a table, having an interesting, nuanced conversation. Because this probably would have never even entered my periphery in discussion if I hadn't had the opportunity to go do ayahuasca. And I didn't go do it.
Well, they will have you back when the time is right. I will go with you. I will film this time and just work out. The gym needed work. They actually had a shaker weight.
Nice.
So that was probably my only, like, you could get a few Kaiser or Sorinx like things in here, and this would be so much better.
What I was really hoping to do was to get Shanji all whacked on ayahuasca and then try to submit him. I was going to get on his back.
Oh, he was laid out one night. He took like something excess of 4 cups and he was laid out. But
I would have got him in like an ankle lock and just like, I got him.
To close this out on religion, I think spirituality, you said it best for me. Nature is closest to godliness, whether that's a beach on a sunset, Everest. And I even remember I had to do one tour on a ship, and that's all I'll say. And we had a flight deck, helicopter deck. And when the sun would set or the sun would rise out in the middle of the sea, it's one of the most, it just makes you feel that small, that this vessel could sink, and you will never be found.
Well, one of the things, I have I go back and I think about like, in terms of like mentors and pillars, like what do I want to accomplish? And one of my key things is always like return everything better than you find it. So this year was, like, I don't, you and your wife came out when I was doing the burn pile, but like the amount of like work that I've been doing in terms of like clearing the cedars, grading the land, building things out and doing things is this idea of like, I need to return the land better than what was found. There was all this like weird like car parts because I guess they probably had like a junkyard at some point where we are, but they had cattle in this. So I find razor wire and all this weird shit. So I've been grading it and like doing a lot to make it better than what it was. And there has been like numerous times, we have this really special piece of land because Little Barton Creek starts just up the road from us, like 50 feet, and then comes down to a waterfall. And it's just this really killer piece, and we own both sides. And like there is so much cool things within that creek that I've been down there working. Like I was getting rid of China berries and just, just basically managing the land like a steward. And I'm not necessarily doing it because, we have to do this to build this. I'm like, no, because you have to return it better. And the next person that'll show up to buy this place or the next person that gets a chance to live here will be like, man, whoever lived here before us did what was right and took care of this place. So I was down there cutting China berries out and kind of doing all this stuff. And I was by myself. And like, all of a sudden I look over and there's like 3 deer watching me. And then you look over and like there's an owl and a hawk. I mean, like the amount of cool things within nature and like the sounds and the winds and like it's just like I looked down and I was in the creek and we had a pretty dry summer, so the creek had really gone to a trickle. I looked down and there was like literally like a bass this big, like where was he in like when the water went to a trickle. And I knew it because there was this, like out of nowhere. Like, so I see these things and I have these moments where I'm like, part of something or the sun comes through or you hear a sound or you look up and you see these, deer or whatnot. And like, I have more connection within nature and like something that I would deem as being part of something bigger than I ever have within the confines of a building, listening to somebody, tell me stories.
It's like the top of the mountain. Those have to be the most, I've been to the top of certain mountains, but the most majestic. I couldn't imagine Everest, and you don't get a long time on Everest because there's a line behind you.
Yeah, you got to get down.
But
like going, you grew up in California like me, like
Sierra Nevadas, and
the Sierra Nevadas, going to Mammoth and the Minarets, and like even like on that ride, coming down through the redwood forest and stopping and seeing the redwoods and realizing how small we are, and then getting to the water, and then coming down and Cambria and Monterey and riding through all that, and we were carving all the way through it. Like to me. Those pieces, and I think that's the hardest thing of living here in Austin, because I'm so connected to California in terms of the ocean and the environment, but yet I have a weird, almost like exiled revolutionary feeling of like I can't pay into a system that destroys California. So as much as I love California and it's my home, I'm here in exile in protest of what they've done to my state, and I'm forever fucking hate Gavin Newsom. I have a buddy who used to snort a lot of coke with him. They used to bang hookers and do all this shady shit. And he's on my Rolodex, and I know because he used to deal him coke and used to talk about all the blow they did. So Gavin Newsom's a piece of shit. You probably have to cut that out.
No, you don't. But
okay, but I'm just saying
this is a great transition.
What he's done in terms of like the lawlessness and this like liberal bullshit agenda. And here's the deal: you have to have a system. If people want to come to this country, you have to have a system. You have to take care of people, but you can't allow people to destroy California for a lack of just leadership and empathy and all this other shit that just I like. Last time I was in San Francisco, there's fucking dudes just randomly shitting in the street, right? Like they have mental illness.
It's
you have to do something. Yeah, it is, and it's the most beautiful place. We were walking through Union Square, and literally a dude, and they have a sign that says, "If you see human feces, call this number." And all of the windows on posts were all broken in the cars because dudes were just shattering windows and stealing everything. And I'm like, how do you take the shining city by the bay that I walked as a kid, Fisherman's Wharf and the bowls of the clam chowder and the sourdough, and we would go to this and all these places that I went as a kid. We'd go to Irish Coffees at the Buena Vista, and like just my childhood, because my parents met in San Francisco, so we would go a few times a year and we'd stay at these hotels and walk all over the Drake. Sir Francis Drake Hotel, and we would walk all over and to see what it's become. And to ride that bike and down and realize that, like, if a bomb dropped on those cities, like they haven't got to the redwoods yet. They haven't destroyed Cambria. They haven't done that. But it's hard for me to pay into a system there that so I am in Austin as a California in protest as an exiled expat.
You and me both. I think California is one of the most beautiful states. You can surf in the morning.
The
you can
most
ski in the
beautiful
afternoon.
place on the planet that I've ever been, and I've been everywhere.
And if you drive the Pacific Highway,
Yeah,
then it's you truly understand it.
We got up one day, and when I lived at the Wedge, we got up and we body surfed, and we were like driving, messing around, and my brother was like, "Dude, we should go skiing." And we got in the car, and it took us 4 hours and 40 minutes to get to Mammoth.
Yeah.
And we were at our place. We were on, and we were able to get like 25, maybe 20, 15 runs in the afternoon, and we were skiing in shorts. And it was like in May. It was like the coolest moment ever. And like that was like one of those bucket moments. Be like, dude, we were in the ocean today. We got in the car, we blasted up, and next thing you know, here we are. And it was dope. And it's, and that's where I grew up. And that's like always this, my dad always said, you can't leave. You got to love her. And I'm like, Dad, we got to go.
Yeah.
Like we can't pay here anymore. Like these people have literally driven us out because they are not willing to do what they need to do to protect it. And so when I see something like that, and I fucking hate that dude. And it's because of this, the Soros funded, DAs and this, and my brother's dealing with that as a criminal defense attorney. He's like, Soros came in and bought all these pieces of shit and they do nothing. And he's like, it's destroyed LA. It's destroyed all of California. So
we're moving backwards.
Yeah.
We're moving backwards. And when I was contemplating retirement, and my parents said, my parents will never leave California.
Yeah.
They're in Menlo Park. It's because, our family's been in San Francisco since 1899. They will never leave. That's where their network is.
Yeah.
Brothers in Whitefish, Montana. My sister's looking at Nashville. It's bad leadership equals bad policies, which equals bad outcomes.
Yeah.
And, that brings up, and hopefully this could be a source for a little distraction for people. We're going into 2024. I'm calling it the year of the shit show because this is going to be a complete and utter quagmire.
It's the year of the dragon.
It's the year of the dragon. Dude, all you do is, one, I had a great lady on who's a New York Times bestseller, and she's got a book coming out. She said 80% of the thoughts in one's head are negative in nature. You turn on Fox News, which I love Fox News, CNN or the rest. It's just you're going to be inundated with the border, the election, Trump's trials. So if we can be a little break, the one thing you can control during 2024 and every year for that fact is your health.
Yeah.
It's the one thing you have complete and utter ownership of, from what your workout is to what you put in your mouth. But I'm excited to put out content on, through the Everyday Warrior Nation, which, guys, as we revamp this is about human performance and self-optimization based off those spiritual, mental, and physical pillars. Nothing. And we're not trying to sell you shit. If you want to go, follow Power Athlete for the workouts, they're freaking awesome.
Yeah.
That's not selling. They're effective.
Yeah.
And it gives you a daily guide in perpetuity how long you belong to it. But a lot of what Men's Journal puts out, and love Men's Journal, but they've got to put out articles that are almost like, I don't want to say clickbait.
I call them like they're like the snacks my kids buy. Like whenever we go to the store, like the snacks my kids are like, "Oh, let's try these snacks," and they're literally like these sugary kind of like instant gratification like snacks that you have one, and you're like, "Oh, that was good," And I think a lot of their stuff, when I look at Men's Journal, is like how to get jacked arms with 2 movements. It's all these kind of like little bite-sized snacks.
Bigger arms in 30 days.
Yeah,
that's not how it works. Programming and consistency are the key. And as we go down the Everyday Warrior Nation, and I am touting ourselves or promoting us.
That's because, and I don't mean to boot our own harm, we're good at this.
It requires consistency. John had a professional career. I served at the most elite level in the special operations community, luckily. But that takes consistency to maintain that level of performance in the small things. But look out for the content. We're going to start ramping it up here probably around 1 February. We're going to be putting out a lot of stuff. Some may not resonate. Others will. And that's just the nature of content and how Men's Journal runs. But
I do enjoy for the content we're obviously going to push. I still, and I know a lot of it's bite-sized, like small kind of hits and because it's just how people digest content these days. I watch how my kids digest it. I watch how most people digest it, and it's usually in
1 to 3 minutes.
Yeah, 1 to 3 minutes. I personally enjoy long form. And that's why I enjoy listening to, nuanced discussions with, Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson and some of these people that are really skilled at what they do. And, when I do my pod, when we do Power Athlete Radio, I enjoy having long form discussions with people where you're able to go down and really look at what they're doing and have kind of interesting sharing, because, with the short form kind of bite-sized stuff that people are doing, it's just one direction. We're just pushing information at people. And they can either like, which is their interaction, they can share, or they can comment, let's say. So that's like their piece, but like it's the like there's like no give and take. It's just kind of like information. It's very transactional, and I think I really pray that that doesn't become the norm for everything. Like that, like the nuanced conversations, the long form stuff still exists, because for me and I was on a call for Tim Kennedy's and Apogee. So they have a men's group of all the guys that are starting schools, and they just kind of have like this men's group. And they asked me to come speak. It was supposed to be like 45 minutes. And of course it ends up being 3 hours, as is tradition. But that piece of being able to like understand who somebody is and work through it. And one of the questions I got from one of the guys was like, dude, you have like every question we hit with, you have a pretty like deep, nuanced understanding. I'm like, well, I also subscribe to the idea that you can't learn to think until you learn to read and write. And I've been writing and reading for years, and I work my thoughts out, and also, Jordan Peterson almost said the identical thing, which is what Adrian Cragen, who was the dean of the law school at Bolt, who was 80 years old when I took my recruiting trip at 18, told me the exact same. If you want to learn to think, learn to read or write to the best of your ability. And if you can read and write and you can work these things throughout, you can speak intelligently about them at a later date. But only a fool does it than the opposite. So when I look at a lot of people, I hear them speak, but I don't think they read and write. And so I think it's a fool's errand. So hopefully we have enough information to be able to provide people direction and mentorship and just a lot of these things so that we can enrich and hopefully add something. Because I feel like a lot of what we're being given in the media is fear-based. And, trying to 3 million illegals are coming through, they're invading. And it's like every time you turn it on, it's like a
border.
Dude, it's economy. Border, it's this. Economy. And, Trump and Biden and this. And now all of a sudden these people, and they're in Davos telling you that we're all going to have to eat bugs. And like, it's like you're reading this and you're like, this is like a dystopian movie happening in real time on the news deal, because they know through psychology, the more negative and the more doomsday the news is, the more people are to tune in the next day.
Independent on government. I watched a clip from Davos, and it was one of the, it was an admiral from one of the European nations giving a speech, and he said, they're saying now that people need to be prepared for war in Europe. Yeah. And his response was like, you like, for example, you need to have a flashlight in your house. And I'm like, waiting for a list of, and that's literally what he had, a flashlight. I'm like, oh, buddy, these are the military leaders leading our nations in battle.
But don't you think, and this takes a step back to what you did in Rhythmia. We, like you said, the lady you had on the podcast, 90% of the thoughts that go through her mind are negative. So when you go through, and I don't know if people even realize they're in these fear loops, doing just something with ayahuasca, where now you're having this plant-based medicine experience and you're in this, beautiful place, you have this disassociation where maybe you can get outside yourself to see what's happening. Whereas I'm in this, I have it literally written right here. At every moment, ask yourself, is this necessary? Which is Marcus Aurelius. And I think about this where I do this constant cost-benefit analysis of every moment of my life. At this moment, is this necessary? 100%. To have these conversations, like, this is 100% necessary, not only for me, but for the people listening. Maybe it inspires one person to either check out a training program or do something, or listen and be like, oh, that guy's full of shit. Let me check out something else. He might influence me in a way. So now you have this, at this moment, is this necessary? 100%. But then all of a sudden, as I click into the phone, do you click in and desk scroll on Instagram? Is it necessary? No. You know what? I click out. So it allows me to kind of value my time, spending time with my kids, doing all these other things is at this moment necessary. And there's a lot of necessary things, but at this moment, are you present enough to make this moment the best one it can be? Because I feel like a lot of people are going through life at 40%. I'm just kind of cruising through in this, shift it in, go 100. And then you know what? Like, do something else.
Stay in the moment.
Yeah, stay in the moment.
I wrote about it in the Everyday Warrior. We gathered all the statistics. By the time this generation who grew up with the cell phone hits the age of 75, it was something like close to 10 years will be spent on social media. 10 years of their life. Could you imagine what you could do with 10 years? You could start a business. You could be a black belt in jiu-jitsu. You could master the violin. And so I'm very cautious about how much time I spend on there. And quite frankly, I don't deal with my social media accounts. So it's
I dream. So somebody asked me recently if let's say they just you were instantly had $1 billion. What would we know? Like how would we know? Would it be jets and this whole thing? And I'm like, you would have no social media footprint for me.
And the rich ones don't.
And I would disappear from it. And on top of it, I wouldn't even have a cell phone. I would have somebody next to me with a cell phone that would look at it. And if it's like, hey, your wife texted you or this, and their job would be to literally filter the information, or you would have to fax me something. Be like, if you don't have a fax, I don't know. You got to get a fax to get. I mean, like that's basically what I would do. And I think what we've done is in this desire for convenience, all we've done is added a bunch of things that are distractions.
Complete and utter. Waste of time at the end of the day.
And we're sitting here talking about dumping more content. But hopefully we're like, so I mean, the monster you feed becomes the most dangerous one, right? So if you're feeding like positive information, I mean, if you asked me to get on this podcast and talk about all the ways that the world was going to end in this, I mean, was a solar flare going to end us faster than, the myth of like, I'll tell you, the fastest way to the bottom is this electric car thing. If you sat down and actually looked at the raw materials that it's going to take for them to meet the demands of the electric car, we don't have it. And
they come from pretty unscrupulous places.
And on top of it, the amount of people that are going to freeze and die because all of a sudden the sun's going to go away and none of the solar's going to, they're going to need some form of, fossil fuels to keep these generators. I mean, all of a sudden they have, it was cold here in Austin, right? And what happens is when all of a sudden you hit those freezing temperatures, the batteries are 40% as efficient as they once were. All the batteries in our gate, electric car, you can go 300 miles. Now you go 60% less, 40% killed. And so now all of a sudden you're dealing with like, okay, these are not perfect. The way we're doing with lithium batteries isn't ideal. And we don't have enough lithium and all the other, cobalt and whatever. I mean, you saw that guy who showed up and allegedly this cobalt doesn't have humans. It's just all being strip mined through machines. And it shows children dragging these bags up. And, this phone is from that. And yet, so we're contributing. So, I mean, you can either harp on all these things or you can ask people to try to offer them a version to be the best version of themselves.
So first off, with the freeze we get in Texas, if you're not a Texan, Texans don't do well with cold.
Or precipitation or rain.
What we love about it, Bane looks like he's dead over here, the dog, but we will go out on long walks in 17 degrees. There's no one out. We love it. Yeah. There's no cars on the road. So I actually love during the freezes. Yeah. I do need to get a generator. Yeah. To just to back us up because we've lost power quite a few times during the freezes out here. But the thing with green energy, I don't think anyone's opposed to green energy.
No.
When it makes sense, or as we make that logical transition, I say Biden's approach in this administration of just like it just cut off one and go immediately to the other when the technology and the supply chain is not there. It's like if I'm right-handed and I want to learn to write with my left, I don't cut the right hand off to force myself to write with the left. I slowly build that up. I slowly build proficiency with my left. It's the same thing. This technology is 20 years down the road. Yeah. So yes, we'll slowly wean ourselves off fossil fuels to an extent when it makes sense. And the Keystone Pipeline, we're getting into politics now,
well,
but
it's we're at it's amazing how every election cycle becomes the most pivotal time in our history. Yeah. That's like the level of like fragility.
Democracy is at risk. Democracy is at stake.
Evil orange man is against weird old dude who has tiny little beady eyes because he can't open them because he has a bunch of other issues going on. But like the other problem I run into is I'm like, this is the best we have. I listened to Vivek?
Vivek.
Vivek.
Ramaswamy.
I really liked what he had to say. I like what RFK Jr. has to say. Those guys,
the two of them should pair up.
Yeah, they should. But he's in an interesting piece because you have this fake GOP Nikki Haley character who's running as
she's going to be done after South Carolina. She's
God.
not. She's going to lose her own state. I looked at the polls this morning. It's 65 to 25. Trump.
She's the worst. And you know what the problem is? Like, I'm not a Trump fan. I just am not. But I also realize that the establishment hates him so much
For a reason.
For a reason. And I'm almost, I've never been a Joe Biden fan. I think, his crime bill and what he did in terms of taking black fathers out of the homes and, the fact that he was, he's a fucking liar and he's, plagiarized everything. I mean, he, when 88, when he had to get kicked out of the presidential deal because he was caught, I graduated first from my law school. No, you didn't. I mean, just blatant, stupid lies.
I don't understand that, especially in a world where you can get fact checked within milliseconds.
But back then, the fact checking because it wasn't internet. So he thought he could just stand up at this deal. There was a camera there, and he has to pretty much leave because they realized that not only were all of his speeches stolen, he lied about everything. He's lied about everything. He's been a career politician his entire life, and now all of a sudden, good old Uncle Joe, the right hand of Obama, they redo his image, and he's over there with ice cream going woohoo, and next thing you know, we're going to run this guy. Oh my God! And I mean, that's the best they have. It just goes to show you.
The two-party system is broke.
It's broke. It's been broken. It's been broken since the CIA killed Kennedy.
So the thing too is with Trump, he may not be the president we want, but he may be the president we need. And what I say with that is, let me preface that. There's nothing presidential about Trump. The way he conducts himself.
They burned this whole country to the ground with these riots and the Antifa and the whole deal during COVID and all these.
And that was acceptable. And you have certain politicians saying that's their right to burn and.
But they did that because now whether or not it was a Soros-funded initiative, I mean, they were like, I told you during lockdown, I was driving, I went down to Salt and Thyme, and I was coming back, and I pulled up next to a truck, and there was nobody on the road because it was during lockdown, and there was a black F-150 four-door, and there were 6 dudes in there with masks on, and I pull up, there's nobody around, I look over, and I'm like, they look at me, and I'm like, fuck, we're about to get in a shootout? They made a quick left, got out, and they started unloading bricks, and they were unloading bricks on every corner, because the police were coming, and they were prepping for it. It was very strategic. This stuff
very divisive. He was a very divisive.
It was a weird time, but it was very orchestrated. And looking at it from the outside, I felt that it was very orchestrated. And what you do, you're going to cause this level of melting down and social this and this, and people are like, the adults have to get back, this and it worked.
Trump, when he was elected in 2016, was a brick through the establishment window, and
they went into
mode. They went into mode, and they're like, we need to bring this guy down. Well, they were trying to bring him down before 2020 even rolled around.
But this, I don't think they thought he could win.
And he doesn't do himself any favors.
No. I mean, tweeting at 2 a.m. from the toilet, and he's dropping bombs on people and saying Shane Gillis, the comedian, the comedian, does an incredible Trump deal. And we went and saw him at the Mothership. And his Trump impression is actually, he does better Trump than Trump. You're listening to him, I'm like, I like this Trump. And he'll has memorized all the nuances in this. And he was getting up and talking about Trump coming out of the Situation Room after they killed the leader of ISIS. And he's like, oh, that day, he, died as a dog. And he basically does this monologue. And then they I saw one give the monologue and then they cut to Trump really doing it. It's identical. And he's went on 40 minutes saying the meanest shit talking you've ever done. The least presidential shit ever. I mean, there's nothing presidential about him. And when I think of the president of the United States, you think of the president, and
for all people, a unifier.
Yeah.
And neither side. Biden has, they've
probably the most
we've
divisive.
Created I think there's a new film called Civil War coming out. Isn't there? I think it's due out in either a few months.
Is this predictive Hollywood programming?
Yes. So I've seen one trailer. The trailer doesn't really give you much, but and I'm not one of those doomsdayers like this country's going to civil war. But it's people. There's no civility, regardless of your political beliefs. There's no respect. It goes back to that the prayer at Tecumseh. You probably heard it. God darn it, live your life. Ah, damn it, I'm missing it. But one of the parts is respect others in their views and demand that they respect yours. Yeah. Trouble knowing about their religion. And if people's religious views, even you brought it up with Islamic terrorists, if you don't think I had a bit of respect for that they were standing for what they believed in, you're wrong. I did. Now, when they prey on innocent people and kill little girls and throw gay guys off 12-story roofs. Yep. That part is, it's just like the decision's done. You've got to die.
So it's like, so one of my favorite movies is Last of the Mohicans.
Magua.
The final scene after Magua kills, his son and then throws him down and the girl jumps off and the dad sees it and runs and he does this little commando roll and it, like, I watched that scene and like Hawkeye's running behind him, picking it up and shooting those rifles and like killing these dudes. And like that scene in the Last of the Mohicans, like I've watched that 1,000 times and it's still like, for some reason, the algorithm for YouTube will always show it to me. And I like have to click on it and I watch it. And like, I still like, the music and the whole deal. I wonder, you have to think like, okay, The Last Mohican's incredible book, amazing movie. Like, they're showing you this like Hollywood amazing version of something that was probably so savage and so terrible. And I always get this, like, like you're not going to hear this music. I mean, these people are just like some of the most vicious, the American, like the Plains Indian and the stories in this. I mean, even to the point where the Spaniards and the Portuguese, when they showed up here, were in awe of like
the savagery.
And they talk about coming upon like, 1,000 people that had been skinned on stakes. I mean, just like the level, I mean, like, who do we know if the stories are true, but like the savagery of the American Indian was like nothing they'd ever seen. And that's fucking crazy coming from the Spaniards and Cortez and these guys who were the most vicious humans on the planet. And they were like, oh God, these are unholy people. Level. Yeah, this is a different level.
Speaking of movies.
But what I was saying was like, so like, I'm watching The Last of the Mohicans, right? And it's like, you hear the music and this and everybody's clean and these clothes and like, you go through the whole thing. And then just realizing like when you see the Civil War and like, you hear these like, people romanticizing the whole thing. And then you're getting in, you're like, dude, there's no part of this that ends well. There's no part of this that anybody, and you hear people like vying for it. And I'm like, you don't want this. Ask anybody, and I can't be in this, I'm going to ask you, anybody that's been in war and seen like the death and the decimation and the destruction and like, little kids losing their parents and bombs. And I mean, it's fucking terrible.
War is a failure of diplomacy. It's when civility and dialogue break down and you just said it. There's no good outcomes to war. And we have a complete and utter failure of leadership across the board internationally right now.
Yeah.
And if you want to go to modern times, you don't see China doing anything about the Houthis other than trying to lean on Iran. The Houthis have made a decision to disrupt trade, which 40% of trade for Europe goes through the Suez Canal, and the Europeans are doing nothing about it. Like the Houthis have made a decision. They just... And I hate to say this, I'm like, I never want to see another generation go to war. Yeah. I just don't. I don't want to see my son. I don't want to see my daughter. I don't want to see, I can't announce that one yet. Yeah. But the Houthis just need to be shut down. There is no diplomacy sometimes between certain groups. You just can't have a conversation with somebody who's so illogical and ideologically or theologically.
The only thing they understand is violence.
Oh, they do. And it was actually UBL, Osama bin Laden, that sort of categorized in just the beauty in this statement about the Muslim or Middle Eastern culture. People see a strong horse and people see a weak horse, and by nature they're attracted to the strong horse. People respect power.
Yeah,
I mean, you didn't see the Iraqi people necessarily stepping up and trying to remove Saddam.
No,
there was peace and security.
And
yes,
when
there was
the
also
Sunnis and the Shiites would start fighting, he'd go mustard gas like kill 100,000 of them and quiet those people down. I mean, his level of brutality, but I've always said that's what it's taken to rule in that part of the world for the last 3,000 years.
You brought up Last of the Mohicans. This literally was yesterday. I don't know how this happened, but I pulled up Vision Quest. Remember that? Matthew Brody?
Matthew Modine.
Matthew Modine and wrestling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Watch it.
We had Matthew Modine on Power Athlete Radio.
You're kidding me.
Yeah. We tweeted him because Vision Quest is one of my favorite movies, and
I didn't know that.
I forgot how the whole thing came about, but we started a little campaign on Twitter to get him on, and he said, "Hey, if I can get 100 likes, I'll go and power the radio." So we got 100 likes. He comes on and he's super like, "Hey, you know what? I only got 30 minutes and this." And he gets in. I'm at my agent's house, and he's giving us this whole thing. So then we sit down, and he's thinking we're a bunch of dipshits. And part of my thing and my rhetorical training is like the first thing I'm going to do is find a common bridge. So I just start like working the dude, and all of a sudden we find out that I'm like, "Hey, you know what? Because he was in Stranger Things and this." I'm like, "We're here to talk about." Not only the wrestling movie you did, but also your experience with Stanley Kubrick in Full Metal Jacket. And he like completely changes. And he's like, I was up for Top Gun and I declined Top Gun to do Full Metal Jacket. So Tom Cruise got to do Top Gun because I didn't want to do a rah-rah war movie. I wanted to do a real one. I wanted to work with Stanley Kubrick. So he's like, after I'd done Vision Quest and this, and he went through all the things that he had done, he basically was up for these 2 movies. He declines Top Gun to do this. And I was like, and he's like, Tom Cruise wanted to be Tom Cruise. I'm like, yeah, but he didn't do Full Metal Jacket.
Ooh.
And I was like, as great as, Tom Cruise is like, he's the original movie star. He's as close as we'll ever have to a real old movie.
Top Gun is an action movie.
It is an action
Full
movie.
Metal Jacket is a...
Oh my God. And I was like, it's still my favorite movie, from like Army or military movie.
Did you say Army?
Army. I'm sorry. He wasn't an arm. He was not in the Army. He was in a Marine. But like that thing with Ermey and this, and like, the whole thing with like Born to Kill, the guy like it's just, and then the scene with like the hooker, and he's like, like
too buku.
It ain't too damn buku, right? Like that, and all of a sudden he like flips and realizes that not only, and I forgot what the other bridge we made was, but like, that not only were we movie fans, but athletes, and we weren't there to talk about, anything other bullshit, but just other than to have an amazing connection and hear some back end stories, and incredible podcast. And he even said, he's like, I'm at my agent's house. I'm supposed to go to a meeting. I wish I had like understood a little bit better to be able to be on here longer. And I told him, like, if you're ever in Austin, we'd love to have you in place and like this. And, it didn't, we weren't able to foster and develop it the way we needed. But that Vision Quest movie with, Matthew Modine as Loudon Swain, the shoot, the whole thing.
Yep.
I mean, to this day, like when he gets to the top of the stairs and the shoot looks at him, he's like, "You going to make the weight?" That was like my brother and I's standard line. Like, "You going to make the weight?"
I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. When like, "Hey, are you ready to go? Are you going to make the weight?" Like, it was just standard, like, movie line that movie, I mean, yeah. And to have him on, he's not a Trump fan, which is fine. And at the end of the day, it doesn't diminish anything. Whereas I kind of get pissed a little bit where, some of these actors that have played roles and people are like, "Oh, they have guns." Perlman was in,
it's the prime of hypocrisy.
Well, it is. I mean, they make, but at the end of the day, like, I'm not overly romanced with, where their political standing was. I mean, I was a fan of the movie that they did, and, I have the ability to separate and to realize that people can have different opinions than me and still make great movies and still be a fan of them. That I don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So Matthew Modine, if you're listening to this, I loved you in those movies, and we had a great podcast, because I'll find whichever episode of Power That Radio that is. We'll make cuts of that one. We'll put that one up.
You know what? I'm going to do an article on Vision Quest for the younger generation. Have you even seen it? No
my
clue what
God.
I'm talking about. 1985, filmed in Spokane, which is not far from California. It's in Washington.
What was funny is, Carla, the love interest.
Yes.
So somebody did like a picture rendering of what she would look like today with like normal hair and kind of like the deal. Complete rock star. Like that big hair, when I look at it, I'm like, ooh, but at the time.
Very 80s.
Oh, big 80s, big perm. But like that whole thing, man, I mean, it's still, and then the whole weird thing, like, I can't remember if we got into it, but like the weird thing where like the guy goes and grabs him. You remember when he sees bringing the guy dinner, he's trying to show him Tai Chi. Like there was a weird piece of that. I can't remember.
Which I thought was very, so with that, when that scene happened, for the viewers, basically, he works in a hotel.
Yeah, he's a busboy.
He's a busboy, brings the guy's meal up. The guy's doing Tai Chi, and he's like, "I'll show you how to do Tai Chi," and he tries to cop a feel.
Yeah.
And for the 80s, that was just still like a little...
Well, I mean, part of the thing as a kid of the 80s, and I know people are going to do this, part of the thing was that you had to avoid... that was like part of getting home okay. Like you probably were going to run into like somebody who's going to potentially cop a feel. I mean, I was in a bathroom in Mammoth as a kid taking a leak, and some guy grabbed at my dick in the urinal, and I like
Bold move.
I was
Bold
stumbled
move.
back. And I stumbled back and like, peed on myself and zipped up, and I walked out, and my brother's like, what happened? I'm like, that dude just tried to grab my dick. And my brother's like, let's get out of here. Like we got back on the runs, and I'm like, that was it. I mean, was I a little nervous to go into a public bathroom for a long time? Yeah, I was, but you get over it because you had a child of the 80s.
Go watch Rogue Heroes, which I think is a relatively new. I found it on Amazon Prime.
I'm gonna watch it.
It is about the inception of the SAS, which is known as the Special Air Service. Really the godfathers of special operations well before the Americans, and how they stood up and their fight against the Nazis in North Africa. And these guys, like 60 guys, which 60 jumped in on their first operation, 35 were killed. So they slowly had to replenish. The first jump was a complete quagmire, but basically pioneered mobility assaults. They destroyed something like 400 German and Italian planes. These like this group of like 30 to 50 guys, just insane stories. And it's done in a way where it's AC/DC music. It's nice. Just, I don't know the actors, but you'll recognize them. They're famous British actors. Go watch it. We'll discuss it because the SAS are they're a bunch of badasses, dude.
So when we were in the UK, one of the guys that, that we knew from NSW was over there working with the SBS. And they were on, global war, hunt for drugs and all that. And so we went and picked them up and got to meet some of those cats. So
is that our common associate?
I don't know.
Starts with an H?
No. Different one.
Different one?
Different one. So that's funny. I know he did that similar deal. But yeah, there was a pretty good story about like the first paratroopers. I don't know if you ever heard that. There was kind of a guy who was like a, complete antisocial dude, became kind of I think it was like Crazy Bill, or they got some name for him, but I watched a little thing on him about the first paratroopers, and like they gave them like a 4% chance of reaching the ground.
Yeah.
They were like, we're going to throw 1,000 of these dudes out. We're hoping 40 hit the ground, and they weren't off. It was like, and then they ended up just going, and as they were going, they were running into other, allied forces. So they just started recruiting dudes, being like, no, just come with us. We're going to go have more fun. And so they ended up with like a band of 60 because they were just like poaching other people, and they ended up with like this dude, and like he's like, what's the deal? He's like, we're just here to cause mayhem. Like, we have no mission. We're here to literally hold and then they were like, hey, we need you to hold a bridge. And these guys were literally like dug in so deep that when they bombed the bridge, they like came out and they're like, woo, let's go. I mean, the story was insane. And these guys are like, and they asked the guy, he's like, honestly, I thought I was going to die on the way down. So I figured anything that I did once I hit the ground was a plus. So I wasn't thinking
You're
about
on borrowed time.
Yeah. I loved it.
Once you watch the movie, I'll hold my comments on the TV show. It's worth it. But you talk about just the airborne in World War II. I think it was something like they expected 70% casualties, 30% would hit the ground. And you're a paratrooper and they're telling you that, like, hey, come, just lie to us.
Yeah.
Lie to us.
Hey, we're all going to meet at the bottom.
Hold that to yourself. Or it's almost like the famous speech, like, hey, we expect that only 1/3 of you will come back. Like, hold that information. Hold that information, wish us well, and tell us to fight like dogs.
Well, and then the other one that I think people forget is when there was no deployments. So when you went to war, you weren't coming home until the war was won. So it's not like, hey, you're going on deployment. So like these dudes were literally like, when you went to war, you weren't coming home until the war was over,
or you were wounded
or dead.
Yeah.
So the only way you're getting out was either horizontal, or on a
long boat home.
Yeah. So there were like and you hear these stories of guys like, I was early there. I was there for 3 years, and I fought in North Africa, and I went here, and these guys have these like epic stories. And I remember one of the guys was getting interviewed, and the guy's like, well, like, when did you deploy home? He's like, we went to war. There was none of this deployment shit.
Yeah.
And he's like, the minute that you won your next thing, like, okay, you won this. Now
go
we
win
need
another
you
battle.
Here. Yeah, go win another battle.
Actually, so my belief is that with global war on terror, they should have kept us over there for longer. And then, I think there's an implicit desire to end the conflict as quickly as possible and get home to your loved ones. But go for 4 months, come home, go back a year later. Plus, the way we were living over there, I mean, we had gyms that were stocked the infantry for the Army and the Marine Corps that were out on these, what you call these combat outposts, lived in such meager conditions with such shitty food. And then we, the special operations guys, had these great gyms. We had full, kitchens with chefs. We lived way too comfortably, man.
So there's a story, Jimmy Letchford, who's actually the CEO for Go Ruck now. Jimmy was a Marine. And the first time he had met one of the SEALs that worked for CrossFit, they had to like show up. Like, he's like, dude, they literally had like a truck and they had to get this delivery. And like, they're going through like, like checkpoints and this. And like, they thought they get up and they back it up and it was like steaks. And they were delivering it to these SEALs. It was like steaks and like, I think maybe it was like maybe some vodka from I mean, it was something like, he tells a pretty funny story, but he's like, they're thinking they're like bringing some like insane cargo for these SEALs, the high deal, and they like pop it off and it's like, ribeyes. And they're like, we've been eating out of fucking cans and MREs, and these guys are over here like staying in like, luxury deal eating steaks. So it's a funny story.
We had the system down. We got some cold lockers sent out to us in some pretty austere conditions, but you know how much morale improves when
if the food is good?
If you got steaks, seafood, I mean, your morale goes up over the small things.
I've long said this in the NFL. I got drafted to play Philadelphia Eagles. When we first got there, the food was dog shit. All of a sudden, Andy Reid, who likes to eat, Big Red, I mean, food's important to him, went out and there was some like, top chef or deal. He basically hires a guy. They're at dinner. He's like, you're coming to work for us. So then when they built at the new NovaCare Center, they built this incredible restaurant, kind of like cafeteria deal. And they brought in this like world-class chef to cook. And like, I would like go talk to the dude and he's like, hey, anything you want for dinner, just drop it off in the morning. I'll cook it. I got smokers. I got everything. So I bring him like a turkey. I bring him a prime rib. I would just buy stuff and drop it off in the morning. The food was incredible. And all of a sudden we start winning. We go to all these NFC championship games and this. And I've come to the conclusion that if you are playing, like regardless of the money and everything else, if you show up and the food is awesome, I will work extra hard for you because I feel like you've taken care of me, right? Like, I mean, if you think about it as like growing up, like if your mom's a good cook and you come home, you're like, dude, my mom's a great cook. I'm happy to help. But like if your mom sucks your cook or somebody doesn't cook, or even if you're married and your wife doesn't cook and you're like, I don't know. I listened to a lady who got divorced and they were like, anything you do different? She's like, yeah, I'd put out better food and build a bigger fence on the next one. And she's like, yeah, I didn't. Like after my divorce, I went and I learned to cook because I realized that if the food is good, the man will always come home. And it's true. Like my mom was a great cook. My dad came home every night for dinner for 55 years. And, so we start winning a ton of games. And then I go, my contract, I get in some contract disputes. I get traded to the Chiefs. Absolute dog shit. It was cold cuts. And I walked in and I almost wanted to cry. And I was like, we're never going to win a game. And people are like, what are you talking about? I'm like, we will never win. Like it'll never happen with this food. And people are like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm like, the food was like this in Philly. They got a chef. They brought in, the food was amazing. We won every single game. We went to NFC championship games. We fucking dominated this thing. Andy Reid leaves Philly, goes to Kansas City. What's the first thing he does? Guts that whole thing, builds it. Amazing food. 6 AFC championship games they've been to, and they're unbeatable. And now he's got 2. And I'm telling you, I'm not saying he's not a great coach. He is a good coach. West Coast
but he knows
offense.
The little things. He knows the little things.
He liked to eat. Yeah. And he said, if I don't want, he's like, look at me. I like to eat. And I know you fuckers like to eat. So the food's going to be amazing. And I guarantee if the food's amazing, and everybody was like, if the food is good, we will march into the gates of hell and snatch this thing out of its mouth. And it's true. And I was always amazed by teams that were so cheap and not feed the players. And they're like, oh, you can, this. And I used to have a meal delivery service make me, and I used to bring my food in because the food was so fucking awful. As I was sitting there begrudgingly eating my food, being like, I should have never left Philly. I used to get steaks made, and it wasn't the money. It wasn't anything. You know what it was? It was the fact that I lost access to a dude that I could drop off a turkey, and I could leave with a whole turkey at the end of the day that was done amazing. And like, so good on you, Andy Reid. Good on you, Big Red, for having the food good. And there's a reason that they're winning.
And good luck to both the all 4 of the teams.
Yeah.
Again, my predictions are Ravens and Niners.
I think the NFL is going to want a Taylor Swift Super Bowl.
You think this is going to be rigged?
I think well, I'll tell you this. The NFL, I'm not saying it's rigged. I'm just saying the NFL has powers to do certain things that allow them to change the trajectory of games, right? For example, if like a penalty happens and there's a challenge or TV timeouts, or there's just a lot of things that were weird when I was playing where I'd be like, like that TV timeout was like, okay, on one 18-play drive, we had 3 TV timeouts. We were out there for like 20 minutes when it was cold. completely killed momentum. So like, I don't know if it's by design or whatever, but just certain things happen that kind of skew the games. And I know the NFL, the amount of fandom and money and emphasis that Taylor Swift as probably the most powerful person on the planet showing up. I swear to God.
She's tainting the game, John.
Dude,
she is tainting the game.
No, she's not. Do you know what she's doing? She's showing up because this is my whole deal. She is like, I didn't realize, like, I wasn't like, I didn't really know, like, I knew who Taylor Swift was. I didn't really know who Taylor Swift was until, because I followed the Chiefs. You know, she starts dating Travis Kelce. All of a sudden, like, now she's like front and center. The amount of money that the NFL is making because of Taylor Swift, not only the ticket prices and this and all, it fucking astronomical. They couldn't have bought this and the good PR associated with it. And on top of it, you know what Taylor Swift's getting? Now she gets to date a 6'5", 265-pound, 10-year NFL player who is an absolute savage. You don't think she's ever dated a dude like that?
No.
No fucking way.
No.
She's dated these artsy dudes. Now she's showing up with a dude that's a legitimate, I mean, the guy's, you know, 2 Super Bowl rings, all pro. I mean, I was Tony Gonzalez's wingman. And, you know, all my friends were professional athletes and big, strong dudes. There is a humor and a humility and just a completely different human being that she's probably never been exposed to and has no way other than to, like, has probably lost her mind. It's probably like, this is probably like the coolest dude on the, and I get to go be something. Like, think about it. Every time she shows up, she's the focus point. She gets to show up to her boyfriend's thing, who's absolutely the rock star that she is, and she gets to sit up there and have fun with drinks. Like, I'm so happy for that girl. Like, I don't know anything about her, but she looks like, based on her music, kind of a, let's say, like, torrid life. But she gets to show up. Yeah. I mean, dude, I was a player. I like every time I see her, she's having a good time. I'm like, I love it. Have a great time. I'm bummed that she's helping the NFL so much because the NFL can be shitty. But for the most part, like, I think the NFL looks at this and is like, we need a Taylor Swift Super Bowl.
Cash cow.
Can you imagine if she shows up to that Super Bowl
and plays the halftime show?
I like, there's no way, because I think if her boyfriend is playing, she's going to want to, like, be there as a spectator and not do the halftime. But imagine if she did, because they've asked her like 10 times, like every year they ask her to do it, and she's like, no, I don't want to peak. I don't want to peak. Like, once you do Super Bowl, it's kind of your peak, and you never do it, so she won't do it. And I like, I mean, I think that they want, but the problem is the Baltimore Ravens are so good.
They are.
Dude, their defense is so good, and I'm so stoked. I play John Harbaugh was our special teams coach in Philly, and I know Jim. I actually, when I got done playing for the Chiefs, I went and they brought me in. I didn't sign with them because I wanted to go play for the Patriots because I wanted to try to win a Super Bowl, and then that didn't work. But so happy for him and that team. They are not only lethal on offense, but their defense is incredible. I'm so excited. The best game is going to be this AFC championship game.
It is.
The Super Bowl is going to be lackluster. I hate to say that, but like, the game is this weekend.
Well, you got to be happy for Detroit. They're finally in a NFC championship.
Dude,
city needs it. And hey, if the Niners get knocked out, good for Detroit. Well, guys, I know we're well beyond the 2-hour mark. John and I can ramble. Hey, just start following the Everyday Warrior Nation. We're going to put out some, let's just say, valuable content.
Yeah.
You'll decide whether it's good or not,
Yep.
and that's ultimately your decision. But we put it out. You judge. Hopefully it helps. Even if you get one nugget from each video, something you can implement in your life, then that's the acquisition of knowledge. It's a knowledge transfer, and that's how we've lived our lives,
Yep.
which each mentor and book we've read. So cool, guys. Anything you want to leave the audience with?
No. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Everyday Warrior Nation podcast.
Power Athlete and John and Mike. You're going to see a lot more. All right, guys. Thanks.
See you.